me to come talk to you folks today. I was like kind of hesitant because I wasn't sure exactly what the talk was going to be about. And when they said, oh, they just want some transportation safety type talk, I can talk about driving all day long. I am very passionate about driving safely, I guess because we just lose so many people every year in the transportation area. So I get a chance to run through some slides up here with you, talk about some very general things. I know you're here for a specific purpose for this, but everything I'm going to say this morning applies to not only your company vehicles and your drivers. It applies to your folks at home and your personal vehicles too. So I'll kind of intermix that in here because it's all about trying to get somewhere and arrive safely, which is kind of what you're seeing on that slide up there. So at any time, if you have any questions or comments, please don't be afraid to throw them my direction, okay? You have concerns for your employees. I've seen some of the agenda that they put out, the different things you're talking about today. Every company has those concerns, job site concerns. You want to make sure your folks got the proper clothing, the proper equipment when they're doing their job. You want to make sure that if they're loading and unloading vehicles or whatever, they're doing it properly, they're doing it safely. When you get to the actual job site, I'm assuming you guys dig some holes. Man, the concerns you've got to have when you're doing that and the accidents that can take place when you're doing those kind of things. Trench safety, I think I saw on your agenda, which is fascinating to me. Years ago, you just dug a hole and put some people down in there and, hope they came back out. Things have changed so much over a period of time, and I even saw pathogens on the agenda. So I know the concern is for the safety of the employees and the safety that's going on your job sites, and it's good that it's all there. My thing is you got to make it to the job site. You've got to make it home. You've got to make it these different places. And one of the things that you need to understand is driving a vehicle out here on these roads is one of the most dangerous things you will do on a daily basis the rest of your life. I'm sure you do dangerous things from time to time, and we all do. But the reality of it is driving that car, getting in that vehicle and going somewhere, whether it's to work or whether it's on vacation or whatever, up to Brahms to get some milk, it's one of the most dangerous things that you'll do on a daily basis. You need to also keep in mind that you're driving in one of the most distracted driving societies that we've ever had. People are so somewhere else when they're driving cars, and we'll get into a little bit of that here in just a minute. But also the third thing that I've got up on my slide is you are driving in one of the most fatigued driving societies we have ever had. An enormous amount of people don't get the sleep they should get. And I don't know about you folks, some of you may be in that category, but it's kind of hard to make yourself shut down sometimes and go get what you need. So those are kind of the situations that we'll cover here at the very beginning. How many people do you lose in this industry every year? Anybody got any idea? No? 50? I mean, I'm just guessing, you know what I'm saying? It's a number, and it's tragic if you lose one. It's very tragic even if you lose one person, okay? But there's still dangers and inherent dangers in what you people do and what your employees do and what they do when they get out there. Driving a vehicle, we typically lose between 30 and 45,000 people a year in this country. I don't know if you folks realize that number. It varies and it fluctuates. Different things will affect that number. It can be all the way to, maybe they come out with a new safety device, maybe they come out with new technology, whatever it is. But it fluctuates somewhere usually in that range, which is a ridiculous amount of people. That's equivalent to 100 people a day. That's equivalent to 2 airliners taking off from airports in this country every week and crashing into the ground. I mean, if 2 airliners took off every week full of people and crashed into the ground without fail, would any of you people be running out to the airport to get on one of them? You know, I'm going to guess no, you know what I'm saying? And that's just a made-up scenario. But this is something that really happens, and it really happens every day in this country. You know, and I think one of the big problems is, when number one, we're not aware of it like we should be. We don't hear about it. We have disasters in this country all the time. We've had hurricanes out toward the south and southeast. We have earthquakes. We have tornadoes. We're familiar with those down through this area. We have all kind of man-made disasters. We have idiots that want to blow up buildings, shoot everybody up, drive trucks down the sidewalk. Who the heck knows what people are going to do anymore, you know what I'm saying? But when those things happen, you hear about them. You hear about it on the news, and you hear about it weeks later and months later and years later. I mean, we still run marathons for the Murrah building, and rightfully so, you know, we should remember those things. But the thing that gets me is we don't hear about these people. And I'll guarantee you almost everybody in here has been touched by a car accident at some time or another in their life, some way or another, you know what I'm saying? But typically, you might get a little 5-second blurb on the radio or something that says, hey, a man was killed on Highway 81 last night. You know what I'm saying? Boy, if it's a bus crash, you know, it may get 15 seconds. So I think it's something that we tend to accept as that's just what happens if we drive cars. But what I like to tell people is, you know what? We can do more. You know, you're not just a bug flying across the highway and hoping a windshield doesn't come along. You know what I'm saying? We got a couple extra brain cells up here. If we were that bug, you know, we could look over there and say, hey, there's the tallest truck. Let's fly this high over the highway, you know? Now, you may be flying over the highway looking down at the trucks laughing, and a bird may come get you from behind. If you kind of know what I'm talking about, that's just life. Things are going to happen. But I just want people to be aware that these things happen, how they happen, and that you can do a little bit more to keep yourself safe. You can do a little bit more to keep your employees safe, to get to the job, to do whatever they need to do, to get your family home every night. I mean, when you think about the things that society does to try to make it safer, what are some things that society does to try to make it safer? You know, we put laws in place. Man, we got laws, don't we? The book, State Traffic Laws, is about 2 inches thick. It's crazy. I enforced those laws for about 27 years, and there's so many of them that sometimes things happen, and I said, that's wrong, but I sure the heck don't remember what they call it. I gotta find that number. You know what I'm saying? That's how many of them there are. In the state traffic laws, it says, if I'm gonna turn or change lanes, I have to signal 100 feet in advance. Okay, we all knew that, right? But you could go over here to Oklahoma City and turn right after signaling 100 feet in advance, and there's a chance you could get a ticket. Oh my gosh, how come? Well, Oklahoma City passed an ordinance that says you have to signal 150 feet in advance. So now every little city, every little town out here in Oklahoma can pass all their own traffic laws in addition to the state's, as long as they're equal to but not less than that. So do you know all the laws in Midwest City, Dale City, Bethany, you know, Gotebo? It's almost impossible to know all the laws. You know, they put laws in place to try to help keep us safe. And when it comes to laws, here's what I tell people. Drive with common sense and common courtesy. If you'll drive with common sense and common courtesy, you don't have to worry about all them books of laws, because that's all they're trying to get you to do, is to comply and stay safe, okay? Another thing that they do, road engineering. Roads are different than they used to be. Some of you may drive rural areas. You remember those old county bridges that always did this, that made for excitement sometimes? Yeah, you know, they take those roads out now. We've developed interstate highways. What's the purpose of an interstate highway? Eliminate intersections. Now we got people going off and on at highway speed. It's supposed to make everything better until somebody wants to cut the center median or something, you know? So highway design, rumble strips, I think, are one of the coolest things they've ever come up with. What a cheap fix to put down the side of the road to make people aware that there's running off the edge or going across the center line. Little things like that. And then our cars have gotten safer. I'm probably the oldest guy in here. And I remember watching those films back in high school. They'd show you when you got your license, Signal 30, Wheels of Tragedy. Man, you know what I'm saying? Well, you can't show those anymore. It might traumatize somebody. You know what I'm saying? I'm not going to argue with that, okay? I mean, it traumatized me. I drove pretty good for about 6 months, you know, and I think it kind of got me through that bad hump right there. But on those films, I mean, those cars in those days, the steering column was a solid pipe from the front axle to the driver's chest. When we had head-on collisions, it wasn't good. You know what I'm saying? You don't even think about that anymore. You've got, you know, collapsible steering columns and stuff like that. And the things that we thought of back then, they used to have the key in the dash right in front of your right knee. Anybody remember those? And every time you ran into something, you impaled your knee and popped your kneecap off with the key, you know? So some genius said, hey, let's indent the dash and put the key in a cupped area. Some of you might remember that. So we go through transitions with safety and the different technologies, and I have a whole presentation on some of the latest technology that they put in some of these cars, and it's absolutely fascinating what they do today. So we do that to try to eliminate these deaths and make it safer out here. Dates, July 4th, usually one of the highest fatality dates. Makes sense, doesn't it? You know, this isn't rocket science right here. You know, the more people move around, the more we have crashes. We got more people moving around the 4th of July, and what else are people doing on the 4th of July? Drinking a cold beer, yeah. So when we start throwing these things together, when you look at statistics on automobile crashes, it's not hard to figure out. You know what I'm saying? August, usually there's a lot of driving around in August. If the economy's better, and gas prices aren't, if you're making decent money now and the gas prices aren't $5 a gallon, people are going to take more driving vacations and things like that, and then here comes a higher chance of something like that happening. Evenings and weekends, obviously, more people moving around. Saturday's usually the highest. Tuesday's usually the lowest day for fatalities. Again, there's fluctuation in there. But like I said, when you look at it, it's not hard to figure out. So I always tell people, if you're going to be driving, and let's say you're going to take your family on a vacation, think about the day you're driving. Think about what time you're getting off the road. Do I want to be out driving with my family at 2 o'clock in the morning? What's happening at 2 o'clock in the morning? Yeah, So the bars are closing. So not a good time to be out. Let's get off of the road by then. If I have a night vision issue, I want to be off the road before it gets dark. So we have to think a little bit more about our drives and plan our drives when we're going to do something out here, okay? You have a company and you have employees. You're interested in them getting there safe and getting your product there safe and making some money on a job, okay? So here comes driver's training. It's a big part of what you do. Who should you train? Well, the obvious one is the person that drives the company vehicle. That's going to help you with your liability, isn't it? If something should unfortunately happen with your company vehicle, you can say, well, we provided training. You can show an attempt to make that employee a safer driver, okay? You got an employee that has a bad driving record. Maybe that's the individual you want to pick out and say, I'm going to send them to some driver's training over here. I want to get some points off their record. I want to keep him as a valuable employee. I want to keep him where I can utilize him, whatever the case may be. And then we have that other employee, that one we don't think about when we think about driving safety. The one that shows up at 7 in the morning, opens the office, makes the coffee, answers the phone, makes the appointments, sends out the invoices, pays the bills. You know what I'm saying? This person may never touch a company vehicle, but if you lose that individual on the weekend or in the evening, even in their personal car or on the way to and from work, sometimes that's devastating to a company. And what I have found is a lot of companies are saying, hey, you know what? We've initially thought about these people driving our trucks, like OG&E. We train all the OG&E employees here in Oklahoma. Well, we start with the trucks and this and that and this and that, and then pretty soon we've got the folks in the office because they have figured out if I lose an employee anywhere in my operation, now somebody has to make that up, whether they're off on extended leave or whether they've unfortunately, met their demise, I have to have somebody to make that job up, and that usually means overtime by other people, or I got to hire. The hiring process, depends on where you're at, could be a nightmare. And then I have to train somebody back up, to do that job. So they're finding out that, hey, we need to spend a little bit more time with our employees and make sure that we ensure their safety. This is the part where driving needs to be considered a job in itself. I mean, it's part of what they do. You load your tanks on your trucks, and excuse me if I'm ignorant about exactly what some of you do, okay? But, you load your truck, and then your employee has to get to the job site because you got people there waiting to install or whatever. It has to be thought of as a separate job. It has to be thought of as a separate job if you're driving, on vacation. And I don't want to ruin driving experiences for people. We all drive for different reasons, and there's actually people that take pleasure rides. Are any of those people in here? Okay, saw a hand or two. Typically people take pleasure rides are people that have a motorcycle. They have a really fun car to drive. They typically don't live in Oklahoma City or Tulsa, or sometimes they just have a screw loose. I don't know what's going on with those people, but the point is, a lot of people drive for different reasons. But you still have to, when you get behind that wheel, you need to say, this is my job to do, okay? And I need to concentrate on that as much as I do anything else. The guys at OG&E, I asked them, now would any of you all get in one of them buckets and go up to that 500,000 volt power line and do this while you're working on the power line? And they're like, oh heavens no. And I was hoping they'd say that, oh heavens no, your people wouldn't be down here. I'm sure the guy wouldn't be running a backhoe with a couple of guys standing right there next to it going, yeah, look at that, look what happened today. So it seems obvious you wouldn't do that on your job, so why would you do it driving your vehicle? That's a job in itself. So we need to get the mindset that driving is a job, and there's no place for this when we're driving that vehicle, okay? Distractions. They used to call it multitasking, but somebody's come up with a new term for it now, and it's called switch tasking, and it kind of makes sense. We really don't do two things at once when we're doing something. What happens is our brain does this for a second, and then it switches to this, and it does this for a second, and then it switches back. Well, I'm here to tell you, people that switch task do not do the job as efficiently and as safely as they can if they just perform it doing it itself one at a time. I'll tell you how I found this out. I was talking to a couple guys here. My youngest daughter was one of those folks that got laid off at Chesapeake, and she was in between jobs, and her and her husband watched too much TV, and she said, hey, let's flip a house, okay? And I knew they came to me because I was the money guy on top of the whole deal, but I said, hey, I used to be a union carpenter years ago. Okay, you help the kids out. Oh my gosh, it's not fun like it is on TV. I can tell you all that right now, okay? Forget that stuff. There's not a crew that comes in there and fixes it, It was fun tearing it out. But anyway, my process during that whole deal was I would work at OSU during the daytime, and then I would come home, and I have a Jeep, and I'd back my Jeep up to my little trailer that had all my tools on it, and then I'd hook my trailer up, okay? Well, hooking up a trailer, the process is back up to it, let the trailer down on the ball, hook the latch down, put the safety pin in it, hook a couple safety chains, and plug the lights in, okay? Well, this is how desperate I am for this venture to be over, that I said, I'm going to speed things up. So I'm going to speed up hooking up my trailer. How dumb does this sound? But this is how desperate I was, okay? So I back up to the Jeep, and I'm letting the trailer down, and while I'm doing that, I'm going to plug in the lights at the same time, okay? So I start plugging in the lights. Well, guess what? The lights aren't getting plugged in right, and I look up and my arm is stopped. Or when I got done, I'd forgot to put the safety latch in or something like that. And that's when it dawned on me, if I just did the job methodically, step by step by step, I got it done quicker and I got it done without problems, okay? So switch tasking doesn't work. You're not in a classroom setting. I've got a wonderful exercise to prove it to you, but there are some things you can find online or some little tests you can do at home to prove to people that when you start trying to do two things at once, things get messed up. And I found that out very quick when I was doing that, okay? So That's the problem with multitasking, or what they call switch tasking when people are driving. It just doesn't work well. Companies should have policies or recommendations, employee driving guidelines. It's just one of those things, because you never know what people are going to do when they get in a vehicle. You know, I do a lot of 15-passenger van training up at the OSU campus in Stillwater. You know, and I do some for OG&E, and they have guidelines, and they have policies, and they have recommendations. And I think it's just a good idea to have somewhere and let people know, so they don't go out here and do something that may be obviously wrong for them to do, but they may not think of it when they're doing it, okay? So a consideration that you may want to think about. We have to understand when we're driving a vehicle, going back to this distraction thing, when you're driving a vehicle, the lives of everybody in your car, the lives of the people that are in the other cars, you know, the bicycle that you're going around, the people walking along the side of the road, the people that you're passing on that 2-lane highway within 6 feet of each other, you're counting on them to do what they're supposed to be doing. And they're counting on you to be doing what you're supposed to be doing. And that's why we're having so many problems out here. People are not, again, treating this as their primary job when they drive a vehicle. I mean, it's almost to the point where people should be almost like a cockpit in an airplane. They should build cars up there where the driver sits. He's undistracted. He doesn't have a bunch of things. There's a wall back here, and let people do in the back what they want to do, okay? But car manufacturers want to sell you a car, and they want to make it as great as it can be. So they provide you with things to make your car more comfortable and give you more things to do than you should be doing while you're driving the car. I'll be honest with you. My wife's car, when I sit in her car, it's nicer than where I sit at and watch TV. It warms up if my butt's cold. You know what I'm saying? It blows cold air if it's not. People come from this side, it vibrates over here. And if I bump the line over here, it vibrates over here and moves the car back where it belongs. Sometimes when she sits in traffic, I think just to have fun. I'm not sure what's going on with that woman. But it's amazing what the cars do. You know what I'm saying? But by making them all that comfortable, they provide distractions for us as drivers, okay? What's the worst thing people do when they're driving a car? What do you think is the most dangerous thing people do when they drive a car? Anybody?
Mess with their
Phones, okay? I'll tell you one of the first things that most people point out, reading. Reading a newspaper or a book. Folks, how can you do this? I have no idea. I have a hard time reading when I'm holding something, you know. I'm kind of illiterate, I guess, but I have a hard time reading anyway, and to sit there and try to drive a car, and you see them in rush hour traffic with the newspaper in front of them and everything else. I have no idea how people can do that. You know, if you take a car that's going 70 miles an hour, it's going 105 feet every second on the highway. Every time you say 1001, your car's went 105 feet. How long do you think people look down to read a text or look down to read a book at a time? How many seconds would you think? 10? Yeah, I think the average safe guess is 6 to 8 seconds. You know what I'm saying? 6 to 8 seconds. Let's just say you read for 3 seconds. At 3 seconds, at 105 feet a second, you go 315 feet. That's equivalent to a football field for 3 seconds. And it's more likely 6 at least. 2 football fields. Can people go left to center in 2 football fields? You know, can people run off the edge of the road? Can people run over the bicyclists along the edge of the road? Even at 30 miles an hour, that's 45 feet per second. So when you think about it, looking down and reading things is not good. Now, I know people don't text anymore because we have a texting law, correct? How's that working for you? You know, I think the texting laws made it worse. Now, instead of people holding the phone up here and texting and maybe having a little bit of peripheral vision, maybe a brake light might catch their attention or something in front of them, where they got the phone at now? Down here, isn't it? And you can tell who's texting. They're driving down the road going like this. I told a friend of mine, I said, I'm going to open a neck clinic. Now, there are people going to have a bad neck like mine. I know it in a couple of years. And I was telling somebody that story, and they said, oh, they already got a name for it now. It's what people are happening to their necks looking down at their phones. Let's see some other things people do. Reading. We talked about texting, but we didn't talk about phone calls. Phone calls. You're 10 times more likely to be in a crash if you're talking on your cell phone in your car than if you're talking to someone in your car. What's the difference?
We're trying to visualize that person, what they're talking about on the phone, and they're not doing that in the car.
Okay. Basically, we as human beings exchange a lot of information in different ways. Body language, expression on our faces, tone in our voices. Guess what? When you're on a phone call in your car, you get none of that. You get none of that. So what do? You concentrate harder on that cell phone call. The normal person standing here looking out here has about 160 degrees, probably of peripheral vision, field of vision. When you start talking on a cell phone, you get a little perceptual narrowing that takes place. And all of a sudden, you might as well have a paper towel tube and be driving looking through that paper towel tube, because that's about what it's like when you're driving talking on your cell phone. How many of you have done this before? You drive somewhere for 15, 20 minutes, and you get where you're going, and you look down and go, how the heck did I get here? I don't remember anything about driving home. I've done it too. You know what I'm saying? The thing is, what did you miss? What was it that you missed with that perceptual narrowing? Was that car that was going to come in and maybe run the stop sign? Was it that kid that was in the yard playing with the ball? That's the problem with talking. We miss details. And it's the details that we need to be looking for as drivers. Okay? Eating. You're supposed to eat in your car. You're supposed to eat and drink in your car, aren't you? You've got cup holders everywhere. Every restaurant in town's got a drive-through window. I mean, hey, believe it or not, I'm a human being, despite what my wife says. If she calls and says, honey, I'm not cooking tonight, bring something home. And I go through the drive-through window, and I set that food over there, and I'm driving to my house, and I smell them French fries, they're not safe. You know what I'm saying? I mean, we all do little things in the car, you know what I'm saying? But just don't do two-fisted, drinking whatever else. Okay? But that's one of the plugging in devices. Everything plugs into your car anymore, doesn't it? And what kind of plugs are they now? They're not the big round ones like they were. Now we have USB. I can be looking at the back of a computer or something with a USB cord. It takes me 2-3 times to get it plugged in. Now I'm driving down the road trying to plug in a USB something in my console somewhere. It's absolutely bizarre. Non-driving thought. This could be anything. You might be thinking about that job you're going to. You might be thinking about that trip you're about to take. You may have a sick kid. You may have a sick parent. You may have a significant ruha with your, significant other. Who knows? But anything other than driving that takes our mind off of it can be just as bad when it comes to distractions as a physical distraction, okay? So what I like people to do, and I really spend a lot of time on distractions, so I think it's one of the biggest problems that we have out here today. When you see vehicles stuck in the back of stopped semi-trucks, people are not looking. You know what I'm saying? So what I tell people to do is think about what can you do to prevent distractions, whether it's for your employee, whether it's for yourself, whether it's for your family member that might be driving a car. How do you prevent phone calls in the car? Well, that ought to be simple enough. Just turn the phone off, right? But auto response. I'm driving the car right now. I'll get back with you as soon as I get where I'm going. Different things. Some of the cars come with the technology now. You can shut the phone off of your kid's phone if they're driving the car and the car's moving. The kid's phone won't work unless it's a 911 call or something. So they're coming up with some great stuff. But we need to start thinking about what can we do to eliminate those distractions. I'm so old that I remember when I would go to work in the morning and I would go to the office and I would say, does anybody need anything? And if they did, I took care of it, okay? And then I might get in a car and I might drive for 2.5 hours to Durant, Oklahoma. And when I got to Durant, the first thing I did was walk in the office down there and I called Oklahoma City and I said, does anybody need anything? That's how we used to do it, okay? And then we got modern and they gave me a pager. Now, some of you young kids in here don't even know what I'm talking about. But this thing is, I thought a snake was getting me all the time. All the way to Durant. Bzz, 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 and I'm pulling over and I'm making phone calls, and guess what? None of it was that important. I always ask people, how many text or phone calls have you gotten that saved your life? And I'll get somebody every once in a while that'll raise their hand and say, yeah. But as a rule, almost everybody across the board can say, I've never got a text or a phone call that saved my life. And I say, well, how many of those 30 to 45,000 people up there aren't here anymore because somebody got a phone call or a text? You know, I know in my own personal family, my son-in-law's cousin, she went left to center and killed 2 other people and herself messing with a text. You know what I'm saying? So I see it all the time and I know what happens, all right? So eliminate the need for that as you go. Eating and drinking in the car. There's a Starbucks. Anybody go to Starbucks? There's a Starbucks between my house and the highway, okay? And I go by it in the morning and the cars are lined up around the block. Now, I don't understand this, okay? I don't understand getting a cup of coffee, give it a French name and squirt some whipped cream on it and sell it for $8, but people do that, okay? But you can't figure I'm kind of a simple guy. You know, my wife went to Walmart and she bought a coffee pot. And when I wake up in the morning, the coffee's made. It's on the counter. I stagger out there and the coffee's on the counter. And I pour my cup of coffee at the house and I walk over to the freezer and I open up my box of Jimmy Dean biscuits I paid 17.5 cents for a piece. And I throw one in the microwave for 32 seconds and I eat it. You know what I'm saying? So I eliminate eating in the car in the morning by doing that. If I wore makeup, which I probably need, I'd get up 10 minutes earlier, put my makeup on. You know, people holding the steering wheel with their knee, with the visor folded down and the mirror up and 2 hands putting on mascara is not safe in rush hour traffic, you know. But I've seen it before. So any of those things that we have talked about as far as a distraction, there's a way that you can prevent it. And I think it's incumbent upon you to do that with your employees if you can eliminate distractions. You know where you're going before you get in the vehicle. I used to know Oklahoma City like the back of my hand. When I was a kid, I went to work with my dad. If I wasn't in school, I went to work with my dad. He was a construction superintendent. He had a pickup truck. And I rode everywhere with him. At 12 years old, you could have said, Billy, that's what they call me then, call me all kinds of things now, Billy, take me across Oklahoma City to such and such. I could have took you there, okay? Because in the 60s, in a pickup truck, what did I have to do? Nothing. But sit there and watch my dad drive. So at 12 years old, I knew Oklahoma City like the back of my hand. I knew don't go to that class and traffic circle. That's where all the crashes are. I knew this is how traffic patterns worked. I knew all that before I ever got a license. You see what I'm saying? What do kids do today when they go somewhere? The first thing they have to do when they get in the car is Google it. And then they watch their phone and where they're at on the screen as they're driving down the street. Well, they're lost. Because guess what? While they were growing up, they never looked out the window. They were playing with their games or watching movies in the headset or the headrest or something, and they never looked out the window. So again, if you're going to go somewhere, know where it's at before you go and get in the car. Any of those distractions we've talked about, there's a way to eliminate them, okay? So make sure people know where they're going before they leave your business to go to a job site or something. Don't let them be looking for it while they're driving down the road. We tell drivers to employ the what-if strategy. And this is one we teach in our motorcycle classes too. You're driving down the road, your employee's driving down the road, they need to use the what-if strategy. What if that car doesn't stop up here? What if this kid runs out in the street? Think about it. What are you doing when you play the what-if strategy? You're making a tiny plan. Believe it or not, that 2 or 3 second thought that you give to what might happen up here is a tiny plan. Because I'll guarantee you right now, if you people ever get in an emergency situation that you have never thought about, you don't know what you're going to do. My previous career, they used to teach us preparation, not paranoia. Visualize stopping a car on the side of the highway and a guy jumps out with an AK-47. What are you going to do? Duck? Put it in reverse, make distance? but didn't drive, run over him. You know what I'm saying? But you visualize these things in your mind. But if people don't visualize those things, I guarantee you, you don't know what you're going to do. You might sit there and point at him. You might fall on the ground in the fetal position with your thumb in your mouth. You as everyday drivers, if you haven't thought about a situation, you don't know what you're going to do. And the problem is there is evasive action, but there is also improper evasive action. You know, put yourself on a 4-lane roadway with a center median, grass center median. You're going down the left-hand lane, coming up behind some cars, and you're looking off, and you look up, and they're stopped. And you're not going to be able to miss those cars in front of you. You're in the left-hand lane. How many of you would swerve off in the grass to miss them? Most people would. That's your instinct. Swerve away from what is about to happen. But I can tell you right now, you go into that center median with any speed, you might as well be on an ice rink. And you're going to come out the other side of that median into oncoming traffic. Hello, semi-truck. That's an improper evasive action. But if you've actually thought about it and said, man, there's a median there, I don't want to go into that, your next thought might be, hold on to your neck, I'm about to hit you. That might be the better of things that could happen. You know what I'm saying? If there's a wall here, I'm going to hit the wall. It's my fault. You see what I'm saying? It's the best I could do. But you need to think about it. You need to play the what if strategy and build that little plan in your brain. And if you start doing this as you're going down the road, believe it or not, as a situation presents itself to you, you will react properly. Okay? You'll react properly to it. All right, switching gears. One of the other things I talked about, fatigue. We are a sleep-deprived society. Most people do not get the amount of sleep they should get. People that are higher risk, young people. Why young people? They stay up all night, they're busy, they're doing stuff, they got homework, they got part-time jobs, they got friends, they got electronic things to mess with. Well, here's the real deal. Also, younger people need an hour to an hour and a half more sleep at night than an old guy like me. It's just the way it is. Their bodies are still maturing, and they actually need more sleep. Who do you think's getting more sleep? I guarantee you it's old Bill here. You know, I used to fight it. I used to fight it when I was younger. You know, I'd be up watching the big game in overtime. I got to go to work in the morning. Overtime. I got to watch overtime. Second overtime. My favorite sport's ice hockey. These aren't short overtimes. These are 20-minute stop periods, okay? And I'd stay up and watch the silly game and feel terrible the next day. Then my head started doing this, and I got a little older and I got a little wiser, and I went to bed. And then I woke up in the morning and I found this thing called Sports Center. They show me all the good plays, they told me who won, and I feel good all day long. You know what I'm saying? But as kids, we fight that. You know what I'm saying? If you work any shift work, it messes up your sleep patterns. And people with sleep disorders, this is an interesting thing real quickly, people. If you think you have a sleep disorder or somebody you know has a sleep disorder, encourage them to go get a sleep study done and find out. People with sleep disorders, they'll be in bed for 8 hours just like everybody else, but they never get that deep sleep that we all need to get fully rested. They sleep in a light sleep all night long. And here's the interesting thing. If people get poor sleep for like 3 or 4 nights in a row, it starts feeling normal to them. They think that's normal. And I found this out with my oldest daughter's husband. He was one of these guys that he'd want to watch the game or something, and he'd come over to the house, and by halftime he's drooling all over my couch. And I thought, well, you know, he's one of these brainiacs, you know. He takes this bag right here and he makes it into a computer. He's a smart kid. He can't walk from here to there without falling, but he's a really smart kid. And I thought, well, maybe his brain's just so busy he gets tired. And then they moved to Minnesota and they went to grad school. And my daughter said, you know, I won't let him drive because he always acts like he's falling asleep. He finally went in and got a sleep study done, and guess what? He needed one of them little masks. He went to the doctor. They gave him one. He said it took him about a week to get used to it. And he said the first night he slept all night long, he said, I woke up and said, oh my gosh. He realized that he had never had a good night's sleep in his life and didn't realize it until he finally got one. So sleep disorders are a really unique thing. You need to think about if somebody's having a problem, okay? Because you need to understand the warning signs that come with being sleepy. And they show these ways to improve alertness up here. But I'm going to tell you right now, folks, those are Band-Aids for sleep. You need to understand that your body's job when you're fatigued is to put you to sleep. You're fighting your natural body's response. I mean, how many of you have done this before? You're driving somewhere and you go, scare yourself to death, huh? Then you think, that'll keep me awake all night. That scared the fire out of me. 10 seconds later, you're doing the same thing. That just goes to show you your body's going to continue to try to put you to sleep. So get some sleep. Make sure the people that work with you get your sleep because it makes a difference on how they perform their job. You should do a pre-drive inspection. I'm sure you do that with your vehicles. You don't want them on the side of the road. You don't want your personal vehicles on the side of the road. I do a whole 30-minute deal on roadside safety, telling you how dangerous it is to be on the side of the road. You don't want to be there, okay? A lot of companies have their employees do a pre-drive inspection. I start my pre-drive inspection a little sooner than most people. Mine starts when you walk out of somewhere. I see some big trucks sitting out here with some tanks on them. You know, whoever's driving that truck needs to realize you could be a potential target. People go, what are you talking about? Remember them people I talked about that want to drive the truck down the sidewalk? Wouldn't that be a good one to do it with? You know? So people that drive larger vehicles need to understand it probably would never happen, but we need to be aware that that could be somebody's vehicle that they want for a weapon. You don't want to get your throat cut coming out of Arby's to go get in your truck. You know what I'm saying? But it's sad we have to think that way, but that's the way we think. I don't want my daughters coming out of a mall looking down at their phone and not looking around to see if there's creepy people out there. So it applies to everything that you do in your life, okay? Check in your vehicle when you get out to it. Do that walk around. Look to see if the tires are low. Things happen to cars. A lot of people, you know, they look at it one time and they don't look at it again. You should look at it every time you go out to your vehicle. You should look around that truck. You should look around that car. Look for leaking fluids, low tires. Those things are really critical, especially on higher center of gravity vehicles like these trucks you've got loaded. You know, pickup trucks, SUVs, they're all a little higher center of gravity and tires make a huge difference on them. Make note of what's around that area. Don't forget that parking blocks in front of your car. Have you ever seen people run over them things? That's pretty funny unless it's you. Little poles behind you, those sorts of things. A lot of companies, it says up here, consider decals and magnetic signs. A lot of companies, like OG&E or they used to be Interjex, they'd put a sticker right by the door handle of the vehicle that said, do your walk around, do your 360. One company, Enbridge, they had little magnetic signs that said, do your walk around. And when the people got out of the company vehicles, they had to put it across the door and the body of the truck. When they came back, it reminded them, I got to walk around, and then they'd take it off and get in their vehicle. It's critical that you don't end up on the side of the highway. Very dangerous place to be, you know. The side of a highway, if you don't do your vehicle maintenance correctly, you end up on the side of the highway. You know, we lose, just on interstate highways, about 610 people a year on the side of a highway. It's a very dangerous place to be, especially with those distracted and fatigued drivers I talked about. That's one of the problems. And then if you end up out there at night sitting on the shoulder, you are looking for trouble. Because at night, people driving and see your taillights sitting on the shoulder will fixate on your lights. And one thing about automobiles, vehicles, you will go where you look. And if people are looking at the taillights on the vehicle sitting on the shoulder, that's where they're going to go. They actually call it the moth effect. They call it the moth effect. You know, it's just no different. You turn on your porch light, moths and June bugs just crashing into it. That's what people do in cars if they're fatigued or if they're impaired. Okay? So you don't want to end up on the side of the road. One way to prevent it, through your vehicle maintenance. You guys, I saw some tanks out here, so I thought this would probably be a little thing to throw in here. Properly secure your loads. I'm not going to spend a lot of time going into these laws because I'm sure they've changed since last time I looked at them. They change regularly, okay? That's through the federal regs and things like that. But just for example, a truck with no headboard, 2 properly rated straps, and the first one in the first 10 feet, the other one, you know, whatever. And that's the way this one was rigged up. I saw sitting out in the parking lot, you know what I'm saying? If it doesn't have the headboard, then you got to throw an extra strap on there. Folks, I don't want to cut it that close. If it's me, if I throw a couple of 2x4s on my trailer behind my Jeep, I spend 30 minutes tying that stuff down. You know, 27 years of driving the highway, I found so much stuff laying on the road. I know people lose it all the time. You know, I've never bought a boomer or a chain. I guarantee you that. That stuff's laying everywhere. So I do a little overkill, and I'll admit it. So why, if I'm putting something on the back of a truck, do I going to sit there and guess if it takes 1 or 2 or 3? You know what I'm saying? Throw an extra one over there. How long does it take? It doesn't take that long to throw an extra one on it. It doesn't take that long to take that extra one off. So if you're going to err, always err on the side of safety when you're especially when you're securing loads or things like this, which is what you people want to do, because you want to get to that job site. You want to get that job done. You got to have all the stuff when you get there. And there's a lot of people that show up places and they don't have all their stuff, because I see it all the time on the highway. It's amazing what people lose. So make sure that's secured. Backhoes, I'm assuming you use those in your business some? Backhoe, this is what the young man I talked to the other day told me. He said if your machine is over 10,000 pounds, you got to 4-corner it with chains. If not, the chains can go over the top of it. Then there's regulations on, well, if the bucket is in a tray, it doesn't have, but if it doesn't, it has to have a separate strap itself along with the back one if it doesn't have a locking pin. Way too technical for me, okay, at this point in my life. But you folks know what's required and you know what has to be done out here, and just make sure that it gets done, because you don't want to lose equipment. You don't want the liability if something happened on us on the road. You don't want, a crew standing around when there's not equipment to do the job with because it didn't make it or something like that. So I've seen a lot of strange things happen with loads and equipment and those sorts of things. And that stuff, you can hook it up and you can go 5 miles down the road and everything's so loose on that deal, it's just all crazy. So, you got to know to recheck everything constantly as you're going down the road, okay? A few specific situations. I found out I just got a few minutes left. And like I said, I usually talk way longer than this, which hopefully I haven't bored you all too bad here. A few specific situations that I do want to touch on quickly. Intersections. Folks, when you're coming up to an intersection, slow down. That's what you were taught to do when you got your license. Cover your brake, expect to have to stop, okay? By doing that, you also slow the people down behind you. There's less chance they're going to punch it and try to go through the red light like most people do, okay, and they won't hit you. Don't follow other people. They may slam on the brakes quick. This one, very important. You're sitting at a red light and your light turns green. We tell people a slight delay before you move, and one thing you do before you move from that light that just went red to green is you do this. That thing right there can save your life, because I'll guarantee you, every one of you in here in the last week has been sitting at a red light and it turned green, and as you started to go, they just keep going through. They run red lights like crazy anymore. The problem with people that don't have the time to stop at a red light like you and I is if they're involved in a collision with somebody that's pulling out, they're not the ones that usually die. It's usually the car that takes it in the side, which would be you pulling away from the red light. So take the glance before you go through. Before you go through any intersection, left, right, left, I don't care if they got stop signs and you don't. Cover the brake and take a glance, because there's too many people missing this stuff anymore, okay? Don't trust eye contact. Don't assume people are going to do what they're supposed to do. Changing lanes, pretty easy. I think you know that one. Look. Several things you can do there. Know who has the right of way. But you know what? When it all comes down to it, don't get in a crash. You may be right. Don't make the point that we're going to hit because, by gosh, I got the right of way. I've seen people do that. I just wanted to get them to knock their heads together. Just one of you let the other person in. Yeah, they shouldn't have went up there and cut around us, but you know what? It's not that big a deal. Y'all chill out on your driving, okay? And backing and parking, my last thing I'll talk about, I guess, because I'm running out of time here. I highly recommend that you never back. If you don't have to back, don't back, okay? And we'll leave it right there. Use a spotter if you got one. Don't run over one. How's that? I'm getting pride off the stage here.